there is a curve most people never see. A curve that bends not in space, but in time. It is quiet, subtle, almost invisible, yet it carries the weight of 1,000 moments. Men remember it. Not because it is loud. Not because it shouts or demands attention. But because it whispers. It whispers in the corners of their mind. In the stillness after laughter fades. In the pause when the world has forgotten them. A woman, she carries a silence that cannot be measured. It is not the silence of emptiness, nor the absence of sound. It is the silence of being. Of presence. Men remember this. Long after the words have been spoken. Long after the hands have let go. Long after the fire has gone cold. There is a part of them that lingers there, in that silence. A part that does not know how to leave it behind. Even when they try. Even when they tell themselves stories. The world teaches men to chase, to conquer, to own. But there is a depth in a woman that resists possession. A depth that cannot be explained. A depth that cannot be earned. It is not in her beauty. Not in her voice. Not in the laughter that lingers in a room long after she has left. It is something older. Older than the mountains. Older than the rain tapping softly against the window. It is the way she carries herself in her solitude. The way she meets the world without needing it to bow. The way she allows herself to be, fully, without apology. Men sense this. Even when they do not understand it. Even when they are too young, or too afraid, or too lost. It leaves a mark. A quiet mark, almost invisible, but it is there. There is a story in every man. A story of longing, of absence, of returning. And somewhere along that story, he will meet a presence. A woman whose silence speaks louder than the world. And in that meeting, something shifts. Not immediately. Not in a moment of fireworks or passion. But slowly, quietly, like the tide carving the shore. He will try to name it. He will try to capture it. He will fail. Because it is not to be captured. It is to be witnessed. And in witnessing it, he will remember. Always. There is a curve that bends not in space, but in the invisible architecture of the soul. Men see it, sometimes. Sometimes only in hindsight. Sometimes in dreams that return like ghosts. It is in the way she forgives herself. Not in grand gestures, not in proclamations. But in the quiet acceptance of her own imperfections. Men notice this. Even if they do not understand the words for it. Even if they mistake it for indifference, or strength, or mystery. It is none of these things. It is simply presence. A woman present in her own life, fully. And men carry this memory. Like a stone in the pocket. Heavy. Unseen. Always there. He will forget her laughter, perhaps. He will forget the shape of her hands. He may even forget the color of her eyes. But not the curve, not the quiet strength that does not demand, that does not explain, that simply is. He will carry it into rooms filled with strangers. He will carry it through nights of longing. He will carry it in silence, when he is alone with himself. And it will remind him that something exists beyond chasing. Beyond grasping. Beyond the endless noise of the world. The world is loud. The world is insistent. The world tells men to measure, to compare, to win, to lose. But there is a place where these rules do not apply. A place where presence speaks louder than action. A place where a curve bends quietly, without spectacle. Men remember this. Because it reminds them of themselves. Of what they have lost. Of what they have never sought. Of the depth within them that cannot be owned or tamed. There is a sadness in this. A gentle, almost beautiful sadness. For it carries the knowledge of impermanence. Of longing. Of return. And in that sadness, there is clarity. For a man who remembers the curve cannot pretend he does not feel it. Cannot escape it. Cannot erase it. It is a reminder of the soul. Of depth. Of the quiet spaces between moments. Men are afraid of silence. Men are afraid of stillness. But the curve. The quiet, patient, unwavering curve. It teaches them otherwise. It does not scream. It does not command. It does not offer solutions. It simply exists. And in existing, it leaves a memory that cannot be unmade. There is a night when a man will sit alone. And the world will be quiet around him. And the rain will tap softly against the window. And he will remember. Not the words. Not the touch. Not even the love. But the curve. The quiet, unassuming curve. And in remembering it, he will understand, finally, what it means to return to himself. There is a woman who carries no fear of being seen. No fear of being alone. No fear of being herself. And in that, men remember. Always. There is a silence that lives between moments. A silence that is not empty. A silence that holds everything. Men often mistake it for absence, for indifference, for mystery. But it is neither. It is presence. A woman who understands her own silence. She carries it like a river beneath the mountains. Unseen, perhaps. Unheard. But felt in the trembling of the earth. Men remember this. Even if they cannot name it. Even if they wander through years and forget the face, their voice, the laughter. They cannot forget the way she allowed herself to exist. Fully. Without apology. Without explanation. There is an age in a man when the world becomes too loud. Too urgent. Too insistent. And he begins to seek something he cannot define. He seeks meaning. He seeks connection. He seeks the echo of a presence that once reminded him of himself. And he remembers her. Not in the way children remember stories, but in the way the soul remembers the curve of a river. The subtle bend that shapes the flow of everything else. She will not have noticed. She will not have meant to leave a mark. But the mark is there. Indelible. Unfading. Men carry it in the quiet hours. In the nights when sleep refuses them. In the mornings when the world seems meaningless. And they wonder why some loves linger. Why some faces haunt. Why some silences speak louder than 1,000 words. It is not in desire. It is not in longing. It is in recognition. Of a truth that cannot be taught. Cannot be sought. Cannot be bargained for. There is a part of every man that seeks himself in others. A part that looks for the reflection of his own soul. And sometimes, unknowingly, he finds it in a woman who does not need him. Who does not belong to him. Who simply is. The curve bends again in memory. It bends in the quiet moments. In the rain falling against the roof. In the firelight flickering against the walls. In the whisper of the wind through the trees. And he remembers. The patience. The presence. The acceptance. Not of him. Not for him. But of herself. This is what men never forget. Not the laughter. Not the touch. Not the fleeting warmth of a hand. But the courage to be, fully. The courage to be, alone and complete. The courage to meet the world and still return to oneself. There is a beauty in this. A quiet, almost unbearable beauty. It teaches men about themselves. Not in triumph, not in conquest. But in stillness. In reflection. In the gentle unfolding of what it means to be human. And there is a sadness, too. For men know that such presence is rare. That such silence is precious. That such courage cannot be held, cannot be owned, cannot be repeated. It leaves them longing. Not for her, exactly. But for themselves. For the part of themselves that recognizes the curve. The part that has forgotten how to be still. How to forgive. How to return to the quiet center within. Men carry secrets, too. Secrets they will never speak. Desires they will not admit. Fears they will hide even from themselves. But in the memory of her, they confront them. Not fully, perhaps. Not always consciously. But in the quiet, in the shadow of her presence, they face the depth of their own solitude. There is a moment, sometimes, when a man sits alone, and the world has gone away. And he remembers the curve. And in that remembering, he feels the weight of his own life. The mistakes, the failures, the losses. And he feels the possibility of forgiveness. Not from her. Not from the world. But from himself. The curve is patient. It waits. It does not rush. It does not judge. It simply is. And men, they carry it like a quiet flame. A flame that does not burn outward, but inward. A flame that warms the corners of the soul. A flame that reminds them that even in absence, there is presence. There is a night when the rain falls heavier than words. When the firelight flickers against the walls. When a man, alone, feels the weight of years. And he remembers her. He remembers the curve. The subtle bend in the river of being. The silence that was never empty. The courage that did not need him. The presence that reflected his own. And in that remembering, he is not lost. He is found. Not by her. Not by the world. But by himself. There is a return. Always. To the quiet center. To the self that knows. That presence, like silence, cannot be stolen. Cannot be forced. Cannot be captured. It exists. And in existing, it teaches. Men remember. Even when they think they have forgotten. Even when years have passed. Even when life has moved on. The curve bends. And in bending, it guides them back. Back to stillness. Back to patience. Back to themselves. There is a place at the edge of memory. Where silence gathers like dew on the leaves. Where the mind stops racing. And the soul begins to breathe. Men arrive there. Often by accident. Often too late. But they arrive nonetheless. And they remember her. Not as she was. Not as the world would have them recall. But as she existed in that quiet, unclaimed space. Where presence does not demand. Where attention does not seek reward. Where love does not cling. And in that remembering, something stirs. It is not longing. It is not regret. It is recognition. A recognition that the curve was never hers alone. That the silence was never hers to give. That the courage to be fully present was a mirror. A mirror for him. A mirror for every man who has ever wandered. Through noise, through loss, through fleeting connections. A mirror that reflects what he has never allowed himself to see. Men carry scars. Not always visible. Not always understood. Scars of absence, of abandonment, of failure. And in the memory of her, they confront them. Quietly. Patiently. Without judgment. There is a moment when a man will sit alone. And the rain will drum against the window pane. And the fire will flicker shadows on the walls. And he will feel the depth of his own solitude. It is not a punishment. It is not a curse. It is a gift. For in solitude, he learns to return. To himself. To the unspoken curve. To the quiet strength that once belonged to her. But now belongs to no one. And he understands that the secret thing men never forget about women is not her beauty. Not her laughter. Not her love. It is her being. Her being fully alive. Her being unafraid. Her being alone and complete. And men, they carry this memory. Like a compass pointing inward. Like a candle in a dark room. Like the soft echo of footsteps on a quiet street. They carry it into relationships. Into friendships. Into the endless moments of seeking meaning. And they notice, finally, that the world is not enough. That noise will not satisfy. That chasing will not fill the emptiness. Only presence does. Only stillness. Only returning to the curve. The quiet bend in the river of being. That exists, always. Waiting for recognition. There is forgiveness here. Not the forgiveness we speak of in words, but the forgiveness that comes from understanding. The understanding that everything that happened, every failure, every loss, every departure, was a part of the river bending, was a part of the silence gathering, was a part of the soul returning. Men remember. And in remembering, they forgive. Not her. Not the world. But themselves. There is an age when grief and wisdom mingle. When longing and acceptance sit together by the fire. And a man sees clearly that the curve he remembers was never a path to possession, but a path to understanding. A path to the self he had abandoned. A path to the quiet spaces he had ignored. A path to the center of being, where nothing demands, nothing chases, nothing clings. Where presence is enough. And silence is the greatest teacher. The rain continues. Softly. Indifferently. As if it knows no hurry. And the man listens. And he breathes. And he remembers. He remembers the curve. He remembers the patience. He remembers the courage. And in the remembering, he is free. Not free from loss. Not free from longing. Not free from the scars. But free in a way that only quiet presence allows. Free to sit with himself. Free to see the world without grasping. Free to allow love, silence, and solitude to coexist. And he understands that the secret thing men never forget about women is the reminder of what it means to be fully alive. To be complete. To return. Always, to oneself. There is no hurry. There is no ending. There is only the curve. The quiet bend that shapes everything. The invisible arc that carries memory, presence, and wisdom. Through the years, through the nights, through the rain. And when a man sits alone by the fire. When the world has fallen away. And only the soft light of reflection remains. He smiles quietly. Not for her. Not for anyone. But for the part of himself he has finally remembered. The part that had been waiting. All along. In the quiet bend of the curve. And there, in that stillness, he is home.